I wasn't the kind of person who got excited about auctions. I didn't collect vintage cars or chase foreclosures on weekends. I worked in corporate strategy at a mid-sized software company, the kind with a clean lobby, quiet hallways, and executives who spoke in acronyms like they were a second language. Auctions, to me, were just controlled exits, divestitures, lines in a quarterly deck, until the day I watched one wrong bid go through and realized it didn't match our own forecast by a margin so absurd it made my stomach turn. Because when numbers don't match in a place like that, it's never just a mistake. It's always a fingerprint. The asset was called Orchard. That wasn't its real name, not internally. Internally, it had a project code, a Jira graveyard, and a list of engineers who tried not to make eye contact when you mentioned it. Orchard was the product we built 3 years too early, marketed 2 years too late, and staffed with just enough people to keep it alive out of stubbornness. On paper, it was non-core. In reality, it was a complete platform, code base, customer contracts, recurring maintenance revenue, and a few patents that legal liked to brag about when they wanted to sound important. When the board decided we were selling it, they didn't ask for opinions. They asked for numbers, and that's where I came in. I built the internal forecast, a clean, defensible valuation model based on comparable transactions, contract retention, pipeline probability, and the one thing executives pretended not to care about until they did: how much this sale would help our quarter. I didn't do it alone. Legal gave me contract terms and assignment restrictions. Sales gave me churn risk. Finance gave me cost allocations that looked like they were written by a committee that hated math. And I turned all of it into a story told in spreadsheets. The conclusion wasn't sexy, but it was clear. Orchard should sell for $8 to $10 million in a competitive process, and we should not accept less than $6.5 million, not unless we wanted to explain to the board why we gave away a platform for the price of a few executive bonuses. That number, 6.5 million, wasn't mine to decide. It went through a process. Deal committee review, CFO sign-off, general counsel review, then the CEO. Then finally, it came back to me in an email chain I printed and saved like I always did. Not because I was paranoid, because I'd learned that in corporate life, truth is temporary unless you keep a copy. We hired a broker to run the process, one of those firms that dresses like investment bankers and speaks like therapists. They built a data room, sent out teasers, collected NDAs, and scheduled management calls where executives answered questions like they were trying not to accidentally admit anything. For 6 weeks, Orchard lived a second life as a growth opportunity instead of a forgotten project. We got interest, real interest, a private equity group that bought software assets and ran them lean, a competitor that wanted our customer base, a strategic buyer with an impressive logo and no personality. I sat in on calls, listened to buyers probe for weaknesses, watched our execs spin weaknesses into transition opportunities, and kept updating the forecast as new information came in. The process was messy but normal, right up until auction week. That week, the broker sent a schedule. Final bids due Friday at noon, decision by end of day. LOI signed Monday if we were lucky. I remember the Thursday before bids were due because I stayed late, alone in a conference room, checking our minimum thresholds one last time. I opened my model, ran sensitivity scenarios, and wrote a short summary for the CFO. What we should expect, what we shouldn't tolerate, and what winning actually looked like. Then I forwarded it to him, to legal, and to the broker. It was routine. And that's why what happened next felt like someone had slipped a knife into the routine and twisted it. Friday. I got to the office early out of habit, grabbed coffee that tasted like burnt plastic, and opened my laptop before I even took my coat off. By 11:40 a.m., the broker had already started sending messages. Bid 1 received. Bid 2 received. Bid 3 received. By 12:10, they confirmed 4 bids in the portal, and by 1:30, they asked for a decision meeting. We gathered in a glass conference room that was too bright and too clean, the kind of room where people say, "This stays in this room," like it means anything. In the room were the CFO, the general counsel, our VP of product, a senior finance manager, and me. The broker joined by video. They shared their screen and pulled up the bid grid. 4 offers, 4 columns, numbers, terms, transition timelines, all the usual. I felt my shoulders loosen for the first time all week, because the top 2 bids were right in range. One was 9.2 mers from the private equity group, clean terms, short diligence, normal transition. The other was 8.7 from the competitor, slightly more conditions, but still viable. I remember thinking, okay, this is going to be fine. Then the broker cleared his throat and said, "Before you decide, we need to address one issue." He highlighted a line item. A 5th row appeared, marked late entry, special handling. And next to it was a number that made my brain stall for a second, like I'd misread a digit. 215. 2.15. For the same asset we had just discussed selling for nearly 10. At first, I literally assumed it was a typo, like someone had dropped a digit, or the broker had pasted the wrong cell. I leaned forward, trying to make it make sense. The broker went on carefully. This bid came in through an alternate channel. The buyer is claiming they were locked out of the portal due to a technical issue. They've submitted an offer with proof of funds and an LOI template. They're also requesting immediate exclusivity. The CFO didn't react the way I expected. He didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss it. He didn't ask why a buyer bidding $2 million for an 8-figure asset was even being taken seriously. He just stared at the screen, expression flat, and said, "What's the buyer name?" The broker answered. It wasn't a name I recognized. A small holding company. Generic. Forgettable. Like it had been generated by an algorithm that specialized in hiding people. The general counsel asked, "Do they have any prior relationship with us?" The broker said, "Not that we know of." The CFO nodded once, slow. Then he said something that made the air shift in the room. "Accept it." I thought I'd misheard him. I waited for someone to push back. The VP of product looked confused. The senior finance manager blinked like he was trying to wake up. I finally spoke, carefully. "Just to clarify, our reserve, our floor, was approved at 6.5. The CFO didn't look at me. He kept looking at the screen. "Reserve can be adjusted," he said. "This is the cleanest exit. We've sunk enough into Orchard. We're not dragging this through weeks of diligence." The broker hesitated. "If you accept, you'll need to sign the bid acceptance today. And I just want to be clear, you're taking a materially lower number than the competitive bids." The CFO's jaw tightened slightly. "We're done. Accept it." The general counsel glanced at him, then at the bid grid again, then back at him. And then quietly, she said, "If we accept below reserve, we need documentation. Board-level notification." The CFO finally turned his head toward her. "We'll handle it," he said. The tone wasn't angry. It was worse. It was final. After the call ended, everyone filed out like they were leaving a room where something died. I stayed behind, pretending to organize my notes. In reality, I was trying to stop my hands from shaking. Because I wasn't emotional about auctions. I was emotional about patterns. And the pattern I was seeing didn't look like urgency or fatigue. It looked like someone steering. I went back to my desk and pulled up the deal folder on our shared drive. The one that was supposed to be locked down but never really was because people always found reasons to need access. I opened my internal forecast. I opened the reserve approval email. I opened the broker's bid log. Then I searched for the latest version of the deal committee summary, the document that captured terms, reserve, and the required sign-offs. And that's when I saw something I hadn't noticed in the meeting, a timestamp. The reserve value on the summary had been changed, not weeks ago, not after the board review. It had been changed yesterday, late Thursday night, and it had been changed by someone with the authority to do it, someone whose name appeared in the audit trail like a signature. Our CFO. I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling that cold, slow realization settle in. This wasn't a typo. This wasn't a miscommunication. This was a decision made in private, then performed in public, like it was inevitable. I scrolled further down the document, checking what else had been edited. And at the bottom, under buyer information, there was one detail that didn't belong there at all. A mailing address. It wasn't a corporate tower. It wasn't even a real office building. It was a suite number in a strip mall, 20 minutes from our headquarters. I copied the address into a note, then into a search bar. And when the result popped up, my throat went dry. Because I'd seen that strip mall before. Not in a business context, in a personal one. I'd been there last month, picking up coffee, when I spotted the CFO's black SUV parked outside a little storefront 2 doors down. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Now, staring at the buyer's address, I realized I had been standing within 50 feet of whatever this really was. And for the first time, I stopped asking, how did the numbers not match? And started asking the only question that mattered. Who was Orchard really being sold to? I didn't go home after that meeting. I sat at my desk until the office lights dimmed, watching the audit trail like it might change its mind. The reserve number had been edited Thursday night. Same document, same deal folder, same approvals chain, and the name on the edit line was the one name that didn't belong there, our CFO. It would have been easier if it looked sloppy, if it looked like panic, but it didn't. The edits were clean, one field updated, one comment added, then saved. Whoever did it knew exactly what to touch and what not to. I printed the audit page and slid it into a folder I kept for boring things. Vendor agreements, old board decks, the kind of paperwork nobody wants until they suddenly need it. Then I opened the buyer's LOI. The holding company had a name that sounded like it was designed to be forgettable. No website, no staff page, no press. Just a logo dropped into a Word document and a signature block that looked copy-pasted. The mailing address matched the strip mall, and the phone number? A prepaid line. I stared at it for a full minute, then did what I always did when something felt wrong. I followed the process, not my instincts. Step 1. Confirm facts through official sources. I pulled up the state business registry and searched the buyer's legal name. The LLC was real, registered less than 3 months ago. The registered agent was one of those national services that exist to keep owners invisible. But the organizer... That line made my spine stiffen. An attorney. Not a firm name. A person. I recognized the name immediately because I'd seen it on our own documents. The same attorney had been listed as outside counsel on a vendor dispute last year. A dispute the CFO handled personally. Because, as he put it, it touches finance. My pulse jumped. It still wasn't proof. Attorneys can represent multiple clients. That's normal. But it was a link, and it wasn't the only one. I opened our procurement system and searched the attorney's firm as a vendor. 2 invoices, both routed through the CFO's cost center. Both marked confidential advisory. No details, no attachments, just approvals. That's when the irritation hit, hot and clean. Not fear, not confusion, anger. Because we were being treated like furniture, like background noise. I took screenshots, saved PDFs, and wrote down timestamps like I was building a case file instead of doing my job. Maybe that sounds dramatic, but in a company that runs on emails and approvals, timestamps are reality. At 8:12 p.m., I emailed the General Counsel. Subject: Orchard Reserve Update Audit Trail, short, neutral, professional. I attached the audit page and asked one question. Was the board informed of a reserve change below the approved floor? She replied 15 minutes later, "Come to my office. Now." But that was just the beginning. Her office was on the executive floor, away from the open plan noise. She closed the door behind me and didn't offer a seat. "What did you see?" she asked. I handed her the printout. She read it once, then again slower. "Did you talk to anyone?" she said. "Not yet." "Good," she said. And for a second I saw something human in her face. Fear, maybe. Or calculation. Because if this is what it looks like, we're going to do this correctly. Correctly meant version history, access logs, document preservation, making sure nobody could quietly rewrite reality before Monday. She pulled up the same file, navigated to the version history, and confirmed what I'd seen. Then she opened the access list to the deal folder. My jaw tightened. The CFO, his executive assistant, 2 finance directors, the VP of product, me, legal, and, oddly, someone from IT security who had no business being there. "Why does security have access?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. She just stared at the name, then clicked. Access had been granted Wednesday afternoon, requested by the CFO. That night, I stopped being the helpful guy who assumed everyone meant well, because this wasn't a bad decision. This was preparation. She sent one email while I watched, to IT, litigation hold, preserve logs, access records, email routing related to Project Orchard, do not alter, confirm receipt. To finance, do not execute any payment, transfer, or closing action related to Orchard without legal approval. Then she looked at me and said, "You're going to keep doing your job, but you're going to copy me on anything related to this transaction." Anything. I nodded, but my mind was already racing. The CFO had ordered the low bid accepted. The broker had hesitated but complied. And the competitive bidders, the real bidders, were going to ask questions. They always did. I went back downstairs where everything felt normal again. People chatting near the kitchen, someone laughing at a meme, the HVAC humming like nothing had changed. I called the broker from a conference room. He answered with his usual cheerful voice, then dropped it when he recognized mine. "Listen," I said, keeping my tone controlled. "I need the submission record for the late bid, the email chain, the timestamp, the explanation for the portal issue, all of it." A pause. "That's sensitive," he said carefully. "It's also part of the deal file," I said. "Send it to legal and me." Another pause. Longer. "Off the record?" he asked. I didn't like that. "There is no off the record," I said. He exhaled. "Okay, I'll compile the packet. But you should know, the buyer pushed hard for exclusivity. They claimed they had internal support." My stomach tightened. "They said that? They didn't say board. They said, 'Oh, we already have internal support.'" That was the phrase, internal support. Like we were a vending machine and they had the right coin. I ended the call and sat still for a few seconds, letting that word settle. Support. The only way a buyer could say that with confidence was if someone inside had whispered it to them, or if they weren't really outside at all. I pulled up next week's calendar. If the CFO was trying to rush this, there would be signs, extra meetings, sudden alignment sessions, private calls disguised as process. And there it was. A meeting invite for Monday morning, 9 gas EAM. Subject, Orchard closing alignment, final. Attendees, CFO, broker, GC, VP product, and me. Then my eyes dropped to the last line. HR business partner, invited. HR doesn't show up to a closing alignment. HR shows up when someone is about to be managed. Or removed. I stared at the invite until my screen went dark, then opened my notes and wrote one sentence at the top, like a warning to myself. If they're inviting HR, they already know who they plan to blame. Monday morning didn't start with a bang. It started with silence, the kind that means something's already been decided, somewhere you weren't invited. I walked into the closing alignment and final meeting with a notebook I didn't need and a calm face I didn't feel. The CFO was already there, jacket off, sleeves rolled up like he was about to do real work. The broker was on video. Legal sat 2 seats away from me, expression unreadable, and HR was there, not in the corner, not just listening. Right across from me with a laptop open and a pen placed neatly on top like a tool. The CFO didn't waste time. "We're closing this week," he said. We're aligned on the buyer. We're aligned on the price. What we're not aligned on is messaging. He clicked a slide onto the screen, a single bullet list. Orchard was non-core market. Interest was limited. Offer reflects risk and transition cost. Forecast assumptions were optimistic. Then he looked at me. Finally, I need you to update the internal forecast summary, he said, like he was asking me to correct a typo. So it reflects reality. We can't have conflicting documents floating around. I didn't speak right away, because in that moment, something in my head clicked into place. Clean, sharp, undeniable. This wasn't about the sale. This was about rewriting the record so the sale couldn't be challenged later. And I wasn't being asked to update. I was being asked to sign my name under a lie. My throat tightened, but my voice stayed level. I can't change a reserve floor after the fact without board notification, I said. If the approved threshold changed, that needs to be documented with the board packet. The CFO's jaw flexed once. He smiled like he was humoring a junior analyst. You're overcomplicating this, he said. We're not asking you to change history. We're asking you to correct assumptions. Then he slid a paper folder across the table toward me. Inside was a one-page memo titled Valuation Reconciliation, with my name pre-filled under prepared by. HR's pen didn't move, but her eyes stayed on me. The CFO said, sign it once you've reviewed. I didn't touch the folder. I'll review it with legal, I said. The CFO's smile thinned. Legal already reviewed it. That was the moment I stopped seeing a bad decision. I saw a trap. Because if I signed, I became the author. If I didn't, I became the problem. And HR wasn't there for Orchard. HR was there for me. After the meeting, I walked straight to legal's office. The general counsel didn't ask how it went. She just held out her hand. I gave her the folder. She read the memo once. Then she flipped to the bottom and stared at the signature line like it insulted her. They're trying to paper the file, she said quietly. Not just paper it, I said. They're trying to make me the reason the price makes sense. She nodded once, controlled. Good. Then we treat you like a witness, not a participant. She opened her laptop and pulled up the litigation hold confirmation from IT security. Logs preserved. Email routing preserved. Version histories locked. And then she said the sentence that made my skin go cold. While you were in that meeting, someone attempted to remove your access to the deal folder. I blinked. What? AITA blocked it because of the hold, she said. But the request is recorded. Who requested it? She turned the screen toward me. Requester. CFO. Justification. Need to limit distribution of outdated forecasts. Outdated. That was his word for evidence. I leaned back, breathing through my nose, trying not to show how hard my heart was hitting my ribs. Because now the pattern was complete. Lower the reserve quietly. Accept the low, late bid. Rewrite the narrative. Remove the person who can prove it was never justified. I looked at her. So what do we do? She didn't hesitate. We escalate to the audit chair, she said. But we do it with something they can't ignore. Like what? Like a link between the CFO and that buyer, she said. Not vibes, not suspicions. Something that survives a lawyer. The broker's packet arrived that afternoon. Time-stamped email chain, attachment list, claimed portal error, the buyer's LOI, and a note from the broker that made my stomach sink. Buyer requested late submission be kept confidential due to internal sensitivities. Internal sensitivities. I printed it, highlighted it, and added it to my folder. Then I did the one thing I'd avoided so far because it felt too direct. I called the number on the LOI. It rang twice. A man answered, cautious. Hello? This is about Orchard, I said. You submitted a late bid. Silence for a half second, just long enough to tell me he hadn't expected a real person. Yes, he said. We did. You said you were locked out of the portal. We were. Can you forward me the error screenshot you sent the broker? I asked. We need it for the file. Another pause. I don't have it in front of me, he said. You submitted a multi-million-dollar bid and you don't have the proof of a portal failure? I asked, calm. His voice tightened. We dealt with the broker. Right, I said, and you mentioned you had internal support. His breathing changed, not a gasp, something smaller. A shift. Who told you that? He asked. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because that question was the closest thing to a confession I'd heard all day. I ended the call without another word and sat there, staring at my screen, feeling the last bit of doubt drain out of me. They weren't buying Orchard like outsiders. They were buying it like people who already knew the doors were unlocked. That night, the General Counsel and I compiled a clean package. Reserve change audit trail, CFO's access removal attempt, broker email referencing internal support, LLC registration, timeline, vendor invoices, to the same attorney used by the buyer. We didn't write accusations. We wrote facts. Then she sent it to the chair of the board's audit committee with one subject line. Urgent, potential governance issue, Project Orchard disposition. 5 minutes later, her phone rang. She listened, said almost nothing, hung up. They want to call at 7 a.m. tomorrow, she said. I stood, grabbed my coat, and finally let myself feel the weight of it. Because if the audit chair took this seriously, it wouldn't be a quiet internal cleanup. It would be chaos. And if he didn't, then I wasn't just watching a crooked sale. I was watching the moment my career became the scapegoat for someone else's theft. I went home and opened my laptop one last time. There was a new email from the CFO. Subject: forecast alignment. Signature needed tonight. Body: please sign the reconciliation memo before end of day so we can close without delays. I stared at it for a long second. Then I replied with one sentence. Cold, polite, and permanent. I'm not able to sign any revision without written board authorization and legal approval. And as soon as I hit send, I realized something else. Tomorrow wasn't going to be about Orchard. Tomorrow was going to be about who controlled the story and who got erased. Tuesday morning hit like a fire alarm. Not loud, at first. Just sudden movement where there used to be routine. At 6:58 a.m., I joined the call with the audit chair, the general counsel, and, unexpectedly, an outside partner from a law firm I recognized from board minutes. The kind of firm you only pay when you're trying to keep a problem from becoming a headline. The audit chair didn't waste time. Walk me through it, he said. Legal did. Clean. Chronological. No adjectives, just facts. Reserve floor approved, change Thursday night. Late bid accepted at 2.15. Broker noted internal support. CFO attempted to strip my access, and HR was placed in a meeting to pressure a signature. When she finished, the line went quiet for a moment. Then the audit chair asked one question, calm, surgical. Is there any legitimate business reason to accept a $2 million bid when we have $8 and $9 million on the table? The CFO wasn't on the call. That was the point. But I still felt the shape of him in the silence. Legal answered, none that has been documented. The audit chair said, then document preservation stays. No closing activity without audit committee approval. And then he turned to me, voice changing slightly. Do you have access to the original model and the approval chain? Yes. Good, he said. Send it to the outside counsel immediately. I forwarded everything. Model, reserve approval email, broker bid grid, version history screenshots, my emails with timestamps, the reconciliation memo with my name pre-filled. When I hit send, my hands weren't shaking. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. At 8:20 a.m., the CFO walked into the office like it was any other Tuesday. He didn't go to his desk. He went straight into the CEO's office. 10 minutes later, the CEO's assistant started sending calendar updates so fast, it looked like someone was rearranging chess pieces in real time. Orchard closing alignment, canceled. Executive sync, moved to 10:30. Finance review, invite removed, me. Then an invite appeared on my calendar. HR check-in, 9 a.m. Attendees, HRBP, CFO, me, no agenda. That's never a good sign. I didn't decline, I didn't accept. I forwarded it to legal. Legal replied instantly, "Do not attend alone, I'm joining." That was the first crack in their plan, because their plan assumed I'd walk into a room, feel the pressure and sign something just to make it stop. But once legal joins, it stops being pressure. It becomes a record. At 9 we walked into a small HR conference room. No windows. Neutral art. The kind of room designed to make people feel like they should apologize even when they've done nothing. The CFO was already seated. HR was beside him, posture perfect. Pen ready. The CFO opened with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "This doesn't need to be adversarial," he said. "We just need alignment. The board expects us to move quickly." Legal sat down without smiling back. "The audit chair expects us not to," she said. The CFO's face tightened for half a second. Then he pivoted, like a man who'd rehearsed this. "We're concerned about your conduct," he said, looking at me. "You contacted the broker directly. You contacted the buyer. That's inappropriate. It compromises the transaction." I didn't raise my voice. "I requested the submission record for the deal file," I said, "and the buyer's statements about internal support are relevant to governance." HR finally spoke. Soft tone, sharp content. "We need to know if you shared confidential information outside authorized channels." Legal's voice stayed calm. "This is under litigation hold. Any questioning of an employee as a witness needs to go through counsel. If you want to discuss allegations, we can do that with outside counsel present." The CFO leaned back, jaw clenched, so he changed tactics. He slid a sheet of paper across the table. A performance memo. It listed vague phrases like difficulty collaborating with leadership, resistance to strategic direction, creates friction during critical initiatives. No dates, no examples, no metrics, just a template designed to justify whatever came next. My chest tightened, not because I believed it, but because I recognized it. Corporate paper armor. Something you throw on before you push someone out so you can pretend it wasn't retaliation. Legal picked up the memo, glanced at it, and placed it back down like it was contaminated. "This document," she said, "will be forwarded to the audit committee as further evidence of interference with a witness." The CFO's eyes flashed. For the first time, his calm cracked. "You don't understand how this works," he said, voice low. "You think the board cares about your spreadsheet? They care about closing. They care about not spooking buyers. You're making yourself a problem." I held his gaze. "No," I said quietly. "You made me a problem when you put my name under something I didn't write." Silence. HR didn't move. The CFO stared at me for a long second, then stood up abruptly. "Fine," he snapped. "Do what you want." He walked out, and for the first time since Friday, I felt something close to relief, because the moment he walked out of that room, I realized he wasn't in control anymore. He was reacting. The chaos exploded by noon. Outside counsel requested direct interviews with the broker. The broker, suddenly very careful, sent a follow-up email documenting that the late bid claim was unverified and that the buyer had requested confidential handling. He also admitted something else in writing. The buyer had called him before the auction week, asking how to submit in a way that wouldn't trigger internal review. That line didn't just smell wrong. It was gasoline. At 1:15, the audit chair sent a message to the CEO and CFO requesting an emergency audit committee meeting at 3 p.m. Attendance required. Materials attached. At 2:40, I saw the CFO's assistant sprint down the hallway, with a folder in her arms like she was trying to outrun consequences. At 3, the executive floor doors stayed closed. I didn't see who went in, but I saw who came out. The CEO came out first, face pale, moving like he'd just realized the ground was not as solid as he thought. Then the CFO came out. He didn't look angry now, he looked tight, small, like his body was trying to hold itself together. He walked straight past the receptionist without saying a word and went into his office, closing the door hard enough that a framed photo on the wall rattled, and then my phone buzzed. A message from legal. Stay where you are. Do not talk to anyone. Audit committee is coming down. I sat at my desk, staring at my monitor, listening to the office hum like normal life. Then the elevator dinged. 3 people stepped out. The audit chair, outside counsel, and the head of internal audit. They didn't stop at the CEO's office. They walked straight toward me. Outside counsel spoke first. We need you in a conference room, she said. Now. They asked me to walk them through everything again. But this time their questions weren't about assumptions or models. They were about motive. Who benefits from a low sale? Who had access to change the reserve? Who introduced the buyer? Who pressured you to sign? Who tried to remove your access? I answered with facts. Then I handed them the last piece I'd been holding. A screenshot from procurement. 2 confidential advisory invoices tied to the attorney who formed the buyer's LLC. Outside counsel's eyes narrowed. Where did you get this? From our system, I said, approved under the CFO's cost center. The audit chair didn't swear. He didn't raise his voice. He just nodded. Slow. That's enough, he said. And when he stood up, I understood what was happening. This had passed the point of internal discomfort. This was becoming a formal investigation. At 5:30 p.m., an all-hands invite went out titled, Company Update, Attendance Required. No details, just the kind of invite that turns a normal office into a room full of held breath. At 6, the CEO stood on the small stage in the cafeteria with the HR head and legal beside him. His hands were clasped too tightly. He said, Effective immediately, we are pausing the Orchard transaction pending an independent review. Additionally, our Chief Financial Officer will be stepping away from his duties during this process. The room didn't gasp. It did something quieter. It exhaled. The CFO wasn't there. And I realized something else in the silence that followed. They weren't just pausing a deal. They were cutting off an artery they'd just discovered was infected. When the meeting ended, people didn't cheer. They just looked at each other like they were trying to decide what kind of story they were in. Legal found me near the exit. Her voice was low. It's not over, she said. He's going to try to take you down with him. I nodded, because I could already feel it, like pressure in the air before a storm. If the CFO was going to fall, he'd want a scapegoat. And I was the person who refused to sign. The next 2 weeks felt less like work and more like living inside a file name. Everything had a label. Everything had a timestamp. Everything was for counsel. People stopped using Slack for anything serious. Conversations moved into hallways, then stopped happening at all when someone else walked by. The office was quieter, but not calmer. Quiet can be fear. The CFO didn't come back after that all hands. At first, I thought that would be the end of it. That the pause, the investigation, the stepping away line would be enough to close the chapter. It wasn't. Because when someone gets caught doing something that big, they don't just defend themselves. They try to reframe it, and the easiest frame is always the same. It was one bad employee, one rogue analyst, one person who misunderstood the strategy. Me. The first hit came on a Friday afternoon. I got an email from HR with the subject, Administrative Leave, effective immediately. No accusation in the subject line, just the corporate version of a locked door. Body text. Due to ongoing review of the Orchard transaction and related communications, you are being placed on paid administrative leave, pending completion of the investigation. Please return company property and do not access company systems. If I hadn't lived through the last 2 weeks, I might have panicked. But now I understood the play. If they could make me look under review, they could muddy the story. They could say I wasn't a witness. I was a suspect. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to outside counsel and the audit chair's assistant, exactly as legal had instructed. Then I called the general counsel. She picked up immediately like she'd been waiting. They're trying to isolate you, she said. So what do? I asked. You do nothing emotional. she said. You do everything documented. That Monday, I was invited through counsel to a formal interview. Outside counsel on one side, internal audit on the other, legal present, HR silent. They didn't ask me to explain the story this time. They asked me to confirm authenticity. Is this the original reserve approval email? Does this audit trail match what you saw on Friday? Did you receive a reconciliation memo with your name pre-filled? Did the CFO request removal of your access? Did HR attend a meeting where you were asked to sign? Yes. 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 Then outside counsel asked the question I'd been waiting for. Did you ever change the forecast assumptions to justify a lower price? No, I said, and I refused to. And why? She asked. I didn't dramatize it. Because the model was built on documented inputs, I said. Changing it after a bid is accepted would be falsifying the record. The partner nodded slightly, like she'd just checked the last box. That was the moment I realized I wasn't being investigated. I was being verified. 3 days later, the broker called legal, not the CFO, not the CEO. Legal. He wanted to clarify something for the record. His voice, according to her, sounded like a man who'd finally read his own liability. He admitted that the buyer had asked him verbatim whether there was a way to submit a bid without triggering the reserve discussion. And when outside counsel pressed, he added something else. The buyer had referred to our guy on the inside, not someone, not internal support. Our guy. When legal told me that, I didn't feel triumph. I felt a kind of tired relief, like a storm finally choosing a direction, because it meant the mess wasn't going to land on my shoulders anymore. It had a name. The board moved fast after that. They authorized a full forensic review of the CFO's corporate communications and expense approvals. They subpoenaed internal email archives. They pulled his calendar history. They requested phone logs tied to the company plan. And they did it the only way it can be done, without debate, through outside counsel, with audit committee authority. A week later, I received a call from legal that I will never forget. Her voice didn't sound pleased. It sounded calm, like a surgeon calling time a death. They found it, she said. Found what? I asked. A draft purchase structure, she said, in his corporate email, sent to the same attorney, months before the auction. It outlines selling Orchard to a vehicle controlled by a related party. Related party. Corporate language for, you were right. I sat down on my couch, staring at nothing. So what happens now? I asked. Legal paused. Now it stops being an internal story, she said. Now it becomes a legal one. The CEO held another all hands. This time he didn't stand in the cafeteria. He stood in the auditorium with outside counsel present. Because now everything mattered, he said. The Orchard sale was terminated. The company was reopening the competitive process with an independent advisor. The CFO had been terminated for cause. The matter had been referred to authorities. People didn't clap. They looked stunned, like they'd just watched the company survive something that should have killed it. Then he said one more line, careful but clear enough that I felt it in my chest. We also want to acknowledge the employee who raised governance concerns through the proper channels. He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. Half the room turned toward me anyway, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was standing alone. A month later, Orchard sold again, not for $2 finim, for $9.6 million. The same private equity group. Clean terms, standard transition. Exactly the outcome our forecast predicted from the start. The board sent out a short internal memo thanking teams for their integrity and commitment to process. Corporate words. But the deposit in our quarterly results wasn't corporate. It was real, and it hit like proof. HR eventually rescinded my administrative leave with a bland apology that sounded like it had been written by someone terrified of subpoenas. My manager, who had avoided eye contact for weeks, asked if I wanted to reset and move forward. I told him yes, because I didn't want revenge in the dramatic sense. I wanted the one thing corporate life almost never gives you, a clean ending, and I got it. 3 months later, the audit chair offered me a new role, internal governance and deal oversight, basically a job that existed to make sure no one could pull that stunt again without tripping a wire. I took it, not because it felt like a win, because it felt like the company finally admitting what I'd learned the hard way. If you want people to trust the process has to protect them when it matters. Sometimes late at night, I still think about that Friday meeting, the moment the 2014 number appeared on the screen, the moment the CFO said, "Accept it," like the room belonged to him. If I'd stayed quiet, Orchard would have been gone for a fraction of its value. The CFO would have smiled through another quarter, and I would have carried the vague, sour feeling that something had been stolen, and I'd helped it happen. But I didn't stay quiet. I didn't sign. I didn't let them turn my name into cover, and in the end, the only wrong bid was the one they thought nobody would question. Because the truth about corporate revenge is this: it isn't screaming, it isn't exposure for drama, it's evidence, it's patience, and it's the moment the people who thought they controlled the story realize they don't.